Okay, so this week is a couple new concepts that I am brainstorming. I'm not an expert in these areas of study, but learning about them and juxtaposing them to the act of teaching and learning. And I think they have significant implication and develop meaning, right? And meaning based off of values and beliefs, which are important, right? Constructing understanding based off of really decent human qualities. And I think that is something today that is even more than ever when we're seeing billionaires become zillionaires. And then every single year, it seems like when we're out and about, we're seeing more homeless people. You know, looking at the importance of values in terms of things like a reputation economy and not in any sense of surveillance, what we see today in terms of like likes and reviews that are still tied to capitalism, but tied to actual values and decorum of a people within a community and building a nation based off of those positive attributes are extremely important, and I think becoming more and more important than ever before. So like what I mean by spirit opposed to surveillance, like it shouldn't be a way in which can then be exploited or manipulated in any way to build any capital gain, but really viewed as a decency of a person and how that helps impact a healthier community. I think we're getting to the time in history finally where kings and queens and villas and yachts aren't actually cool anymore. They're actually kind of disgusting when you look at this abundance of wealth that some people consume, but very basic needs not being met. And as a teacher, you know, working with old curriculum and then still always having to fight for that small raise or that $300 to run your classroom. If you are somebody who are passionate about what you're doing, it doesn't really matter. You make it happen regardless. And a lot of times making it happen regardless means it's coming out of our pockets and we don't make that much money to begin with, right? But anyways, I'm getting a little sidetracked with all this before I start ranting and really get upset about the system and what we could be doing and how much better it could be for so many kids. We need to believe in our kids' ability to accomplish great things. And I think if we do fully acknowledge that, then funding more money to these resources for all kids would be a no-brainer, right? It wouldn't be problematic or a debate and an argument to try to figure out. So this week's all about like earning your feathers. And I had this great conversation a while back with an elder from Fort Berthold Reservation. And as an educator, of course, I'm always talking about assessment and accountability, and assessment becomes this huge topic that is still a huge topic opposed to like developing a lesson that is even worth assessing in the first place. Or, you know, if we were talking about engagement, right? What would a lesson look like then? That would very much drastically change the way we're teaching and learning opposed to accountability. And this goes back to something that I talk about all the time, about how we have this need as educators to control everything and assess everything. We're to a degree like little dictators in our own rights in our classrooms. But when you really start looking at the development of knowledge based off of values and beliefs, and what you do is for those around you, you really get into like a reputation economy, and not a reputation economy in the sense that we see today where we're, you know, looking at likes and reviews and using that in a form to manipulate, you know, what humans engage with, their likeliness to buy something. It's still then tied back to economy, capitalism, opposed to the development or capital of a healthy community and society where we don't see such extreme changes within wealth from our top to our poorest. And as someone who lives in the Midwest, I'm constantly seeing what it appears to be driving around, more and more homeless people, housing prices go up, right? Like these are products of a system within a culture that is producing these outcomes. And without those checks and balances, you know, it becomes more and more extreme. And I think I'm seeing that more now that I'm older, looking at it when I was younger and compared to now. You know, there's a lot that could be done. And in order for that to be done, we need to look at a system in which values decorum of a people. You know, like if you look at this concept and back to the conversation I had, you know, here I am talking about assessment, and I'm getting sidetracked with that because there's so much that could be talked about within this topic. But I remember saying like, you know, what's an A, what's a B? what's a C? Like, who cares about any of those? Depending on the teacher, they're going to be assessing them based off of attendance, right? Not based off of whether or not that C, B, or D actually reflects what they actually know in terms of their standards. It's going to reflect something that a lot of times, if the student is in elementary, they have absolutely no control over, right? Why does an elementary student not make it to school on a regular basis? Like, is it on them, or is it on their parents or the socioeconomic impact their community or family household is currently living under? I know, looking back, like if I didn't have a mom who was there every single day and a functioning family where, you know, they didn't have to take on 2 or 3 jobs like majority of us need to do now just in order to survive, even when you have a college degree, I probably would have had really bad attendance too, you know? And then if that grade reflected that, it's not really reflecting what I know as a human being. What it is reflecting is my socioeconomic disadvantage of the reality in which I am forced to live in. And that's different. And that's basically what this conversation was really getting about, is how subjective grading is and how a lot of times it's not even tied to a standard. But he mentioned, like, how do our kids, especially our young boys, earn their feathers today within academic spaces? And he said it doesn't need to necessarily be literal, but also figuratively, or like a badge on a letterman's jacket, something like that, that indicates that a child has been given the right to learn at their pace, to accomplish these things that have to be accomplished because they're so important, and then having some recognition of accomplishing that. And those accomplishments, like social value that go beyond dollar bills. But when we teach in a sense where the foundation is the values of a culture, and what we do is for those around us, where we take the I per se out of the learning process and the we as a collective group of knowledge, just like when we link, you know, different databases, or when you're doing your dissertation, you're not just looking at one source of knowledge, you're looking at all these different sources of knowledge. And when you have a space that's dynamic like that, you can learn so much from your environment that isn't dependent on the teacher, but dependent as everybody as a whole. And if that's rooted not in like what we see with speech and debate, and I'm not saying that debate was not a thing, I mean, it definitely was. And you see tribes from the East Coast that even our democracy is modeled off of, like the Iroquois, who created these gigantic nation federacies of functioning democracies here on this land through dialogue and debate. But as long as that dialogue and debate isn't rooted in me winning, or winning by default because I set up a trap or something like that, but rooted in these values that we have as a people for the building of understanding, that's a different system that produces a way different end result. So if we have that modeled within whatever we do, if it is speech class, then we're reframing like debate, argument, you know, when you're trying to promote something, I forget what that was, it's so long ago since I took speech class. But you have the construction of knowledge based not off of like manipulation, control, or winning an argument, but based off of collective bringing up understanding of different topics and awareness. Then maybe you'd have a society where people can actually debate and come to a consensus, opposed to what we see today, which is like disgusting, right? I mean, it's honestly totally disgusting when you have the justification of unjust acts and then other things that are very logical that are people are just refusing to acknowledge. It is a breakdown of sanity. It is becoming very crazy because what is it rooted off of? The values of a nation, and what are those? And I'm not trying to be like talking smack and stuff like that, but if we look at this concept of earning one's feathers and the importance of this kind of social credit system, it's very different than what we're currently seeing. And I'm going to give you a couple examples from the article so we can kind of start breaking this down a little bit. So like reputation matters and actions matter. And I think now with like high surveillance societies, and you know, even though we think of that in terms of other countries, think about it in terms of like all the things that we do that are always recorded, whether it be our searches on our phone, you know, things like that are all documentation, and it's probably making people more and more less likely to do things, not in a good way, where it's more off of like a fear and threat-based thing, opposed to building a reputation and what that looks like. And building a reputation is significant and important, and it goes beyond dollar bills. big time. And a lot of times it reflects a completely different set of values of what you're giving opposed to what you're taking, and who becomes bazillionaires and who doesn't, because what they're structured in is the act of giving back. And I know we see that in some sense, and some are more are better at it than others. You know, some of it is a show to say, hey, look at me, I'm a good guy and stuff like that. And others of it is like people really dropping the bank because they really want to do something of actual significance and importance on a society structural level. So returning to balance and purpose, knowing what our purpose is within what we're doing in terms of teaching, and allowing our students to earn these rights in regards to, if we structure that concept of the act of teaching and learning, we're going to have students learning things based off of values that builds what would be considered historically a good Lakota or Dakota or a good human being on planet Earth in general, if it was rooted in some structure of community values of purpose, where we are actually giving back, and not just for like, hey, you're graduating, you know, donate cans to a pantry, but something that goes beyond that in terms of like what gives us purpose in regards to what we're teaching or in regards to what we're doing, where we are then once again connected to our community, less of an I and more of a we would have less social dysfunction, you know, and over time that could lead to a classroom dysfunction, or over time a society dysfunction. So, you know, teaching through reciprocity, honor growth over performance. I'm going to read all these off to you so you can kind of get a list of like actionable plans that can be implemented for these changes. Lead by example, you know, like you are a student, and the best teachers are not just teachers, they're learners first, teachers second. You know, like if you humble yourself within these spaces and create these different spaces that model a different structure, you're going to have a lot more value opposed to students being controlled within a space where they do have autonomy and they can develop the collective knowledge and decency within those spaces that builds citizenship. Okay, and then building community through action, through ceremony, through practices, through things that we do within spaces, creates a connectiveness that goes beyond like seniors, juniors, and is rooted in something far greater than that, because that always changes, right? But values and beliefs that are decent are something that's going to help propel students of how they consume content and how they interact with others in the world around them. And then looking at this act of like earning your feathers. Now in America, we've taken the symbol of the eagle as our own without, I think, fully understanding its greater significance of what it meant to at one time, and still for many Indigenous nation people to have earned an eagle feather. That is rooted in decency, and we don't see that in leadership. You know, we don't see that in what we are doing to propel what we're learning for the people around us. That's a different model of a degree of like decolonizing the way in which we teach within academic spaces, or even the way in which we design our classroom model. So with saying that, like these are new concepts that I am learning about, like earning your feathers, right? Is an article that I read, forget when, in that conversation I had with a friend up north, helped me reframe of like understanding the significance of that, but also like how that could in some way be brought into the classroom setting, right? And then the book Nexus I am reading right now talks about the importance of social credit systems opposed to just ones rooted on economic development and reputation economies. And I think these are good things to unpack of motivating action in regards to why we're doing what we're doing and what we are learning, that can help us then, and I'm not saying I have the right answer for this, but connecting these dots of thinking about how these could inform practice that is rooted in a better way, that produces better citizens, where, you know, different opposing opinions can actually have a constructive conversation. And I think right now we're seeing more and more the importance of that being needed, and that being in the foundation of learning and our actions moving forward.